Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us Joshua Sherrard, who's the President and CEO of Strategic Navigators. Joshua, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be back.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about this topic today because it's really powerful, is cash flow accounting and navigating business partnerships. Now, the word of disclosure is, navigating business partnerships could be about a 4-day course in and of itself. So we're gonna go 30,000-foot view, but I know that there's going to be some great learning points that we'll talk about. So get us started with cash flow accounting. What actually is that, and why is that important to a business?
Yeah, I work with business owners across the country, and I can't tell you how many of them feel like they are disconnected from their books. And what I mean by that is they're doing their accounting based on what they have in the bank account. And, they make decisions based on, here are the invoices I think I have, and here's what's happening in the cash flow. And what we do inside of our organization is we connect the books with that methodology. And so what we are striving to do is striving to make sure that your books reflect pretty accurately your entrepreneurial style. And sometimes that means making the designation for cash basis versus accrual basis. Sometimes that means going in and making sure that you have budgeted things appropriately. I teach people how much money they need to keep in their bank account for the business and not a penny more. And what do you do with that excess? We talk clients through making sure that they are maximizing the timing of their payments. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I meet who are just trying to force their payments to come after January 1st of the next year so they don't have to pay taxes on it. And really, that's just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we effectively use time-tested strategies to maximize cash flow in today's budget and today's books, and then not have to borrow from next year. And part of what we do for that is we're using strategies that have been used for decades. Our average client saves 40 to 60% on their federal income tax, and that can be a staggering number for a lot of the folks that we work with. And I like to say, Mike, if you're an entrepreneur and you are not getting your first $100,000 to $200,000 tax-free, then you need to give me a call.
You said they were staggering, and I couldn't agree more, because if your average client saves 40 to 60% on federal taxes, that's a hard line number. That's not just some, fuzzy math, as they say. So that's spectacular. And anyone listening to this can kind of calculate their numbers and go, wow, that could be X number of dollars for me. Maybe Josh can kind of give me a second look and peek over our, scenario. So another thing that you said that really caught my attention is being disconnected from their books. And not that they don't care or don't know what to look at, but I think that flow of money coming in and the flow of money going out, just from a cash flow basis, a lot of people feel like, or don't realize that, it's the bucket with holes in it. You might think that you did great because you brought in this many multiple millions of dollars last year, but if it's going right back out plus some, that did you no good. So talk a little bit about being disconnected and how, when you are able to clarify that for your clients, a couple of maybe examples of what that looks like to help them close the gap.
Sure. I think it starts with this basic principle. Why did we get into business? I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're a doctor, a farmer, or a finance guy. You got into business to make money. And if we are not strategically making sure that you're growing your wealth as the result of being a business owner, and what I mean by that is moving money from the business to your pocket on a consistent basis. There's that old adage, if you want to be successful in business, pay yourself first.
Yeah.
And part of cash flow accounting means making sure that you're not leaving your money in the business, because I guarantee you, if you leave extra money in the business, it will suddenly disappear.
Yeah.
It's amazing whether you have staff that are feel like you need X, Y, and Z, or maybe you're thinking in that newfound way. When you have a new business, you say, "Oh, I got to spend money to make money," and that's true. But at some point, you got to keep your money. And so, really, what we do in a coaching standpoint, and again, I have a nationwide CPA firm as part of our organization. We literally file in all 50 states, and we have clients that span from a couple 100,000 all the way up to hundreds of millions. And what we do is we get into the books and we start asking some of those very practical questions. What's it like to write the checks once a month or twice a month, and how is that impacting your cash flow, and how does that impact your budget, and are you able to balance those things? And we can coach you through that process and make sure that Uncle Sam doesn't feel like a third partner. Because that can sometimes happen where that's a big chunk of money that you feel like you're paying another person.
And he's a partner that's not silent, and you wish that he was.
Absolutely. How
do I change that structure? So if you're thinking about some of the impacts then of this cash flow accounting, what are some of those structures or moves that could be made to help mitigate or maximize those aspects?
Yeah, so one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to examine someone's structure, and I really like the S corporation structure. It is a pass-through entity, but again, the whole design and purpose of that is that you get to pass through the profit, but then you also get to pass through the negative if that comes too.
Yep.
And so you've got to watch some of that. So we want to make sure that we're going in and we're finding ways for you to take money out of the business in a tax-free or tax-favored manner. Now, another thing that I do for clients is we introduce a secondary company. We introduce a C corporation, and the moment I say C corporation when I'm teaching continuing education for CPAs is the hair on the back of their neck stands up, because a CPA, when he hears a C corporation, he hears double taxation. Okay. And I'm not advocating for that, but we use the C corporation in a very unique and dynamic way to be able to get the benefits over to the entrepreneur or to the business owner. So we introduce what's called a multi-corporation structure, which, again, is not changing any of how you're doing business. It's just changing how you're flowing the cash and how that's coming through to you.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to phrase that is a multi-corporation structure gives you some benefits, but please, those of you that are in the know, don't hear that as double taxation. We figured that out. Give us a minute to explain and then see if it feels right to you. So I think that's a really amazing thing to consider, because I'm sure you've had people that go, ooh, now that's unique. Have you ever worked with, or maybe comment on, a CPA that initially thought double taxation, no, I refuse. And then when you showed them, they're like, now that's got some teeth to it, and that makes total sense.
We have, Mike, and I've taught so many CPAs and interacted with so many. I think I know the spectrum of flavors there. And at the end of the day, there are those that are willing to think outside the box. There are those that are willing to be creative and really feel like they're on your team. And then there are those that really are they think they have it down, and there's not a whole lot more that they can learn. And frankly, I can't work with the second category as much as I can work with the first category. But I tell you, when they get it, they end up becoming some of my best referral sources, because they're on the front lines and they get that question all the time. Is there anything else I can do to save money on taxes? And, I like to say that we do windshield tax planning. So we're looking down the road through the windshield instead of looking in the rearview mirror. Yeah. And that just changes the perspective so much for even the CPA that we're really empowering them, because they're entrepreneurs too. We're empowering them to think about how the future might look.
Yeah, and I think that what you just described there reminds me of the old story. I forget where I heard it originally, but this little old lady wanted to hire a chauffeur, so she gave these chauffeurs a driving test, and they said, go around these mountain passes, and whoever can get the closest to the edge without going over, that means you're a good driver, so you'll get hired. And so the first one gets, a foot and 6, where it's going. And like the last person gets as far away as possible, like hugging the left-hand side and almost scraping the car, and that person was hired. And they go, why? It's like, I don't want to get anywhere near the edge. So what you're describing here is nothing where you're going to put people in potential danger. It just, if it makes logical sense and the legal way to structure things, then let's take a look at that. And you do not want to recommend anything that's going to make someone feel uneasy.
Not at all. And we have thousands of clients, and we have been audited, and we've always, 100% of the time, come back no change, meaning the IRS has evaluated everything that we're doing and says, oh, yeah, we understand that, and here's a few notes and comments on it that make more sense. And I actually think of a very funny instance where I was teaching a continuing education class, and there was a auditor from the IRS. I think her name was Irene, and you never forget that. And Irene from the IRS, and she was in the class and I went through all the things that I do, and I looked at her and said, what do you think? And she came back and she said, as long as you follow the rules, all that makes sense. Yeah. And so, it's about, following the rules, dotting the I's, crossing the T's. But if you do that, you can see, like I say, 40 to 60% is what we see on average. And it is such a significant amount, especially the higher you go in income. I mean, we're typically saving $250,000 or $500,000 for some of these bigger clients, and that's real cash. That's real money.
Because it was going to go to taxes. Now it's going to go to something else. Let's talk about that, right? So now that gives you something to go, well, we can reallocate it toward this, and this. But otherwise, send it to your uncle, your silent partner that's not so silent. So your choice. So that kind of brings us to the last point we wanted to talk about is when you're structuring these things in the business, there's definitely partnerships and there's definitely those considerations. What is your approach to navigating partnerships in a business?
Partnerships are they can be a blessing and they can be a curse, right? And I've been a partner before, and I've counseled and worked with partners. Matter of fact, there's one group I'm thinking of. They were contractors for NASA, so think rocket scientists, and that's a difficult field to be partners. And there were I think 5 of them. And it's challenging to stay balanced. So typically, one of the things I recommend is there's always a point person. There's usually somebody who's better with numbers. They're kind of the gatekeeper, and they're kind of keeping records. And I encourage them, even if it aligns 100%, and it should, with your QuickBooks or whatever it is, have a secondary spreadsheet or something that's just outlining all the benefits and perks and things that you're taking out of the business as partners, because that's really where things start to get off the rails. Hey, you use this aspect more, or you use this aspect more, and how do you keep that fair? So it's always important to have some document that is kind of the overarching numbers document that is where you can both go to and say, here's where it all shakes out. Another dynamic that I try to encourage my clients with is to have that open conversation at least on a quarterly basis, where it's a open conversation where you're saying, how are you doing? How am I doing? And that dialogue of, are we both bringing what we need to bring to the table? Navigating partnerships with the chemistry side of things can be very challenging. And so communication is going to be so important. I think I shared with you, Mike, that I was a pastor for many years, and I did a lot of marital counseling. Partnership is not very different than a marriage. Yep. And so you have to sit down and have communication as the key. It gets very sticky. Number one cause of divorce is finances, right? And so again, in a partnership, it's going to be money. That's going to be the issue. And it's usually the issue is, I don't feel the other partner is doing what they need to do to earn their keep. Mm-hmm. And so having that open, candid discussion is so critical. One of the things that we do in our planning is we actually set up substructures that allow each of the partners to have a little bit of individual character. And that helps to diffuse some of we feel like chocolate pudding and vanilla pudding just got smashed together. Mm-hmm. And so we are able to give some autonomy, and that can diffuse it a little bit and help the overall situation.
Because in reality, if there's a business, if a business is humming right along and set up the right way, I personally might not be the numbers guy, which I'm not. I'm the visionary marketing promotions guy. But if I needed to have a numbers guy, don't don't teach me how to do it. I want to bring someone in, and that's their area of expertise. And that person that comes in wouldn't know one end of a marketing plan from the other. So good. Let me do what stay in my lane. Let the numbers person stay in their lane, and then everybody works well together. But yet, I need to be able to communicate to the numbers person, and they need to be able to communicate to me, or else I'm going to go out and spend money that I don't have. And now that throws a wrench in the works.
100%. And I would add one other thought to that. I think it's so important. I can't stress the value of having a trusted assistant. And usually that's either each partner has their own assistant, or there's an assistant that's servicing all of the partners. But you got to be able to trust somebody. And usually that's the person that's in the checkbook, they're in QuickBooks or whatever it is. I personally take the stance, I don't let anybody else sign my checks, but I will let somebody else write them. And so really looking at that and making sure that there are safety mechanisms in place, but having that trusted person is so critical in the partnership scheme of things, because it gives you another sounding board too. It gives you another individual with perspective, and that can help. And by the way, that assistant should not be someone's wife or one of the partner's wives or spouses. So it needs to be an outside party.
And when you say sounding board, it made me think of something else. So we're talking about partnerships and structure and communication and chemistry and all of that. What do you feel about it, like having a formal or even an informal board of advisors where they're not owners or partners, but there's some entity that becomes like almost a mentor, but also back to that sounding board concept?
Matter of fact, it's funny that you brought this up. Just a couple of days ago, I was having a conversation with a client that's doing what I call hockey stick growth. And he asked me the same question, is it time for me to get a board of advisors? I'm out of my depth. I don't know all these things. And, that is one option. The challenge with a board of advisors is they typically want to be compensated somehow, or it's challenging to put them together. So there are a lot of groups out there, professional gatherings, mastermind type of groups where people gather together. I actually think it's better to interact with, your own colleagues. So other entrepreneurs, for example, if I've got a client who's a plumber and owns a strong plumbing business, I say, hey, go find 3 or 4 plumbers who are not your competition, but who you can interact with maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year. And that might give you some ideas and give you some, a good sounding board for that type of thing.
Well, and to your point, like you think of the Shark Tanks, or, you hear the phrase advisory shares. And so, you might not want to get into, let's bring in a board of advisors and compensate them. And now there's ownership, and maybe that's a world you don't want to live in. But, a board of advisors that is paid external, maybe you pay a monthly fee to be part of this, where you do the masterminding and maybe some retreats and trainings. And even better yet, if you can find those plumbers or engineers or whatever in your industry sector that are like 2 states away, they're not going to compete with you, but they can go, hey, look, man, I just had that same thing happen in my business. Here's how I fixed it. And you're like, hallelujah. What can I do to help you? And well, we're struggling with this. And you're like, oh, I fixed that. That kind of gets down to that Napoleon Hill mastermind. And if everybody can come together, whether it's a traditional, formatted board of advisors or just a mastermind group of people that can help you out, many times you can't see the forest for the trees, and you need that outside opinion. And that's really where, you guys come into as strategic navigators, is having that outside perspective. And not that you're doing a mastermind, but you can be, provide some of that perspective.
And we really do. And we not only bring it from an entrepreneurial standpoint, but we will also color that with a legal aspect as well as an accounting aspect, because that's who we have on our team. I also have access to one of my great friends and colleagues, a man by the name of Dr. John Trent, who does something called life mapping. And he's somebody who I would tap on from time to time. I sit on his board, and he comes in and does this for my clients, where he'll help them kind of map out where you're headed. Life mapping is something that is kind of a storyboard for the journey, and it can really help when you're talking about these partnership conversations and talking about where do we want to take this thing, because maybe one partner wants to last 3 more years than the other partner. And, does one sell to the other, and how does that factor in legally and financially and all the rest of it? So that is absolutely a service that we provide here at Strategic Navigators, bringing all of that kind of that collective wisdom that we have gathered over the years and from a lot of our other clients as well, and bringing it to bear on the current situation.
Yeah, that's just spectacular. And so I guess what I would say here at this point is we could probably talk, like I said at the top of the conversation, we'll talk for 3, 4, 5 days on many of these topics, but this gives a really great 30,000-foot view on some of these topics on cash flow accounting and business plans and structures, and then partnerships. What would be the best way that someone hearing this might want to have you reach out and give a second opinion or an overview? How can they learn more about Strategic Navigators and what you guys offer, Josh?
Yeah, I always direct people to our website, stratnavinc.com, and there's a lot of information there. It also has links to our sister company, Strategic Navigators Accounting, which again provides the accounting services. But we're here to help. I love having the conversation. I love working with entrepreneurs. I like to say that the way that you qualify is you just have to be a person that pays taxes.
Yep.
So
that kind of covers a broad target market right there. So I really enjoyed talking with you today. It was really a pleasure having you on, Josh. Thank you for coming on.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.